Next, we have a panel on how first-party data creates more valuable players in-game. And so, yeah, this is going to be a panel with Jacki Vause from Dimoso, Valerio Sudrio from Usercentrics, Kristan Rivers from AdInMo, Božo Janković from GameBiz Consulting, and Abhishek from NumberEight. I hope my pronunciations weren't too bad.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to our Rockstar panel. Before I get going, I was just wondering who everyone is in the audience. I'm not going to ask you all to introduce yourselves to me, but could you just give me a show of hands if you're a developer or a publisher? Okay, good. We've got the right audience, guys. This is good. This works. Okay, great. Any other qualifications I need to ask for? Right. Okay, so what we're going to be discussing here is how the mobile gaming industry has been going through a real significant transformation in terms of obviously Google's requirements for TCF and consent mode, and the way the industry is moving much more to a privacy-first approach. And as we're seeing a lot more of these regulations get enforced globally, and CPAs rising, and all sorts of things going on, we're now going to just talk a little bit about how we got here and what sort of strategies that we can think about employing when it comes to dealing with all of the increasing regulation in an increasingly competitive landscape. So I'm going to ask my lovely panelists to introduce themselves to you. So I'm going to start with Valerio.
Hello, Hello everyone. I'm Valerio Sudrio, Director of Product at Usercentrics. Usercentrics is a leading consent management platform, so we make sure that publishers are compliant with the privacy regulations so they can sleep well at night. We capture user consent and we pass it to all the technologies that are present in the app so that your marketing tools can keep working properly, as we will speak in a bit.
Hi everyone, my name is Božo Janković. I work as a head of ad monetization at GameBiz Consulting. We're a consultancy firm for the video games industry, and we help game developers with ad monetization, user acquisition, helping you pretty much make more money or spend it more effectively on UA.
Hi everybody, I'm Kristan Rivers. I'm a co-founder and CEO of AdInMo. We're an in-game monetization partner. We start off as intrinsic in-game ads, but we've expanded out now to other ways to help games monetize their audiences. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I've not been feeling 100% the last few days. I know. And so I suppose I'm not going to be as dynamic as I normally would be. The upside is you probably won't get as many F-bombs from me. And I want to say, and I'm going to throw my friend Abby under the bus here in a second, because at least I've been here the whole time. I got a call from Abby about 10 minutes before this conference saying, how do you get in?
Oh my Lord.
You know what? I actually live like 10 minutes away, so I have zero excuse. But hey, hi, I'm Abhishek, co-founder and CEO of NumberEight. We're an ID-less data platform, and ID-less solutions, you know, if you think of in the data industry today, traditional data companies have always been relying on third-party cookies, maids, and otherwise to deliver data, you know, targeting capabilities. We've taken a different approach to how data is collected, gathered, and that can be used for a whole range of use cases, but we'll talk about today on how do we actually leverage first-party data. So that's what we specialize in, NumberEight. Yeah?
Great. So we have a really stellar panel here to talk about individual solutions and approaches to this particular maelstrom that this industry has faced. So getting straight into the content then, let's talk about, because Valerio and I were here last year talking about what was coming when we were really doing some predictions of what was going to happen down the line with all of these regulations coming in. So give us a quick kind of summary from your perspective about where we are, where we've come from.
I think publishers in the room know that this was a very challenging year for them. Last year we were downstairs, we were discussing about what was coming and what we predicted happened. So if you were here or watched the recordings from last year, I hope you took action, because what happened is that TCF became mandatory for all publishers, meaning that all publishers have to pass TCF signal using a certified CMP. Otherwise, AdMob doesn't work any longer. Let's put it very simple. Personalization cannot work as before, and your monetization is impacted. And later the year, we had consent mode, also mandatory by Google. Otherwise, Google Analytics for Firebase doesn't work. And also here, your user acquisition campaigns is heavily impacted. So I would say this happened. It was a painful year, I recognize, for publishers and developers. We've been proud at Usercentrics to support many of you. I don't know, some of you are in the room already. But I would say, I would reflect about what happened in a positive way. I think has been a paradigm shift from before, and we have seen this at Usercentrics as well, where privacy is no longer a legal topic, so sitting with your DPO, but has become a performance marketing topic. And this is really important for the audience to understand this, because this changes also the role of marketers in gaming companies, because now they need to focus more about these topics, and probably they need to start working collaboratively with other teams, like with legal team, with product team. So we've seen a big change, and I think Usercentrics, we say we are entering the privacy-first marketing era, when marketers have to start, thinking about privacy-first tools, ID-less solutions, because first-party data is inevitable, are going to be more and more important. Google and the others are pushing more towards first-party mode, etc. So I think it's time also to start thinking forward and not do like before, where we were waiting for changes to come and then everyone had to rush to fix the problem because no one was taking action.
And Kristan, I know you've been nodding along there because I've seen AdInMo really working sort of straight off the launch pad on when the whole CMP issues came up. So what have you seen from your perspective over the last year on AdInMo?
Yeah, and look, we work very closely with Usercentrics and with NumberEight, so you're going to hear similar stuff from all of us here. To kind of look back a little bit, when I started AdInMo about 6 years ago, I honestly thought we would be in a privacy-first world with zero third-party data, that device IDs would go away. I thought what was happening with the with regulatory frameworks, GDPR, et cetera, and what was happening with the platforms, Apple and iOS, I thought that would all go away. I think directionally I was right. It is going away, but fucking hell, it's taken a long time, right? We're not there yet.
One.
And the frustrating...
One F-bomb. I'm counting.
First one. And the frustration for me really is, because this is where the world is going, it's where the world should go, and especially the developer community, but also the advertiser community, still view privacy as a hurdle, right? Hygiene, something we gotta do just because we have to do it. And I've always been really excited about privacy as a feature, right? This is really awesome. If we just go ahead and embrace it and we say that's what's happening, then we think about what does first-party data mean and how do we create that value out of our players. I think what's happened over the last, let's call it even 3 years. So the changes have been forced upon the industry. And I guess we're getting there. The first one was Apple with the IDFA, ATT stuff, and that forced it on that side. More recently, Google forced it with you had to have a trusted CMP in order to monetize your app or game in Europe. So that's kind of forced people to think about this, but I'm hoping now we're thinking about this as a bit of fun, and something good, as opposed to a hygiene factor. On the demand side, obviously advertisers are thinking about this as well, so it's directionally, again, this is where it's going, but it has taken a while to get there. And I think there's still some pain points, right? And maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, the way that players are given the option to opt in or opt out, whether it's IDFA, whether it's with the CMPs, it's still not very player friendly. And I think that's something that's been driven by, really by the EU and the regulatory frameworks. But if we can make this something where the players also see that, yes, I get to control the information I'm sharing, they will and are on board with that. And we certainly see, when it's done well, huge uplifts, whichever way you want to look at it, on retention, on ARPDAU, et cetera.
You say that because you're a positive person about this, but how does the audience feel about this? How did the publishers and developers feel about the regulations? Do you feel like it's a positive move? Anybody hold their hands up if they think it's positive? There we go. See, we have a job one.
I'm actually with them.
So we have a job convincing this audience whether that could be the case.
Positive or negative, it's there. So
it's there, so you've got to deal with it. But it's quite interesting that, you know, we, having been talking about this for over a few years now, we're trying to get our mindset around to let's see the positive in this, let's see the opportunity. But one of the things we were predicting last year was that there'd be big fines coming down the road. Did we see any of those?
I can speak from our perspective as a CMP. We have seen big, regulatory speaking, I think we have seen big movements from data protection authorities like in France, that now they're investigating into mobile world. The point with the regulator is that they don't know technology very well when it comes to mobile apps. That's why you don't see many fines. It's not because apps, you know, have the immunity, they cannot get fined. It's just because the regulator doesn't know even what an SDK is. I mean, very simple. So
I can maybe speak a little bit about this, and from the publisher perspective, I think, you know, I agree with Kristan that, you know, privacy is something that we need to embrace, but on the other hand, I think it's very challenging for publishers, especially for smaller developers, who need to worry about the game design, about the in-app purchase economy, about the retention, about the user acquisition, and then about general regulation, and then on top of that, you have to worry about the privacy as well. And to make it a little bit more complicated, it's not so simple, because Valerio, you mentioned now France is looking into pushing privacy more, and their privacy agency, and that's exactly that. Even though European Union is oftentimes acting as a one institution, many times each individual country will come up with their own specific regulation. For example, at which age they consider a person to be an adult or underage, or what a language it's allowed when it comes to privacy. Do you need to say agree and disagree, or disagree can be hidden after the second click, and on the first click you can say learn more, or do you need to have an X button or not? So like all these things are making, let's say, a job for publishers, and especially for smaller developers who can't afford a legal counsel full time. It's making it much more difficult for them, and I think that's one of the reasons why developers are maybe being slow to adapt and always doing the bare minimum that needs to be done.
Yeah, and I wanted to finish, and that's what we saw with the CMP. Of course, we want to simplify this, but I wouldn't, because the industry, I've been around now for 4 years. I'm first pocket gamer, like I remember people saying, you know, I don't want to talk about privacy. We haven't been fined in apps. So the point is not about looking at fines, it's about looking at the direction of the industry. Now the industry is going clearly towards privacy, but it's not driven just by the regulators, because last year what happened is Digital Market Act. And the Digital Market Act basically changed the dynamics, because instead of the regulator going after the publishers, they said, if we go after every publisher, it will take us years. Let's go after Google, Facebook, Meta, etc. So they're going after them, and then say, dear Google, from now on, you need to prove that the consent, that any data that you processed is consented. And that's why you get TCF mandatory and consent mode mandatory, because Google wants to get now not any longer the check that you have the, you know, the flag, but actually they want to get the signal so that programmatically has to be sent to them. And that's why, that's what has changed the last years. Now it's embedded into the technology, into the ad tech space. So we shouldn't be looking at this any longer as, you know, am I going to be fined or not? But actually, are my marketing tools working or not? Because many small developers have been talking with them as well, don't realize that today maybe their marketing campaigns are not working any longer. They're basically blind, and they think their game is not working, but actually maybe it's a problem with the setup of the campaign, as Božo maybe can confirm, no?
No, absolutely. I mean, we see that difference between, let's say, eCPM for non-personalized traffic and personalized traffic can be twice the difference. And so if you do not have a TCF 2.2 compliant string, which is being sent to Google and to some other networks, you're going to be making 2 times less money than you will if you do have this properly implemented. And that's why it's also important not only to have this implemented, but also how you implement it. And I think that this is where CMP tools that are certified by Google can come into as very handy, because they know the best practice, and so that will enable you to maximize the consent rate, right? Because it's not the same if 90% of your users are saying, okay, I consent, or it's only 40%. And similarly on the UA side, if you don't have this implemented, the consent mode, you'll simply not be able to run any campaigns in EU or European Economic Area plus Switzerland.
I was going to add a bit to that, because fines, you asked about fines as the starting point of that, Jacki, and the problem is fines aren't the right tool, honestly. And to your point, Valerio, that it's because the lawyers, the politicians making these rules don't understand technology, right? So there were some big fines. You know, Meta got $1.3 billion fine in 2023, huge, right? TikTok got $400 million fine, right? You know what that was in their revenue? That was like 1% to 2% of their total global revenue. If I was a CRO of one of those companies, I'd say, forget it. I don't even care, right? I'll pay that every year to do whatever I want, right? So what needs to happen is, where it's going to change is twofold. One, the DPOs here in the EU, well, okay, not UK, but in the EU, they can get thrown in jail. Now that's going to change stuff. People will start thinking about that when a DPO gets thrown in jail, right? In the US, similarly, as we've seen with, whatever you believe in the kind of politics that are happening there, you can get kicked out of the country, right? And so those are things, and then also Google said, you're not going to make any money in Europe unless you integrate this. So those are the things that are going to make this happen. The fines are, it's great news and it makes some good stories for journalists and whatnot, but that's not the things that change things.
Yeah.
We've been in the privacy space for a while, so I would say, as you would put out, it's like, if nothing's broken, don't change it. And that was pretty much, if you think of as a broader spectrum, digital advertising has been reliant on all sorts of tracking solutions since its onset. Be it cookies from late 90s, then IDs when mobile came up. So all of a sudden you see all these formats emerging and then saying, you know what, cookies are, well, Google pulled back on cookies, but then that has a different side effect. IDs on Apple already went through. Maids on Android will pretty soon follow a similar suit as well. So the tailwinds are already in place. It's a question of what is it actually going to unlock for us? That's where that opportunity is.
That's what I wanted to talk to you about, Abby, because moving this on sort of a little bit is, what are the inherent challenges and opportunities that publishers and developers are having to sort of take into account now? Let's talk honestly about the challenges. I mean, Božo's touched on them.
If you think of the classic, if you have a game has a classic R metrics: acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral. You have those classic 5 R metrics. And what has happened as well as the IDFA changes, and pretty soon on Android as well, each one of those funnel metrics have been impacted. Because one, if you don't have the iOS IDFA opt-in, your cost of acquisition has gone up. That's simple, because people just aren't logging in. They're not giving the ID. So all of a sudden, the same usage you require for $1, it's probably $5 all of a sudden. That makes sense from a supply-demand point of view. So, but the thing is, what that allows you to do is, if you want to have a future-proof, data-reliant or data-informed, and gaming is very data-informed. It is very, you're always tweaking parameters, gameplay, etc. What first-party data in this case allows you to do is, it's not just for ad monetization, but think of it as, because we work across multiple spaces. We in podcasting, we work in gaming, to CTV very soon as well. It actually unlocks, you can use the same data for gameplay optimization, for UA, for AdMon. So a whole range of use cases get unlocked if you actually take ownership of the data. It doesn't matter if your game has 10 users or 100 users. How do you get to 1,000 users? Well, you have to get 10 users first. How do you get to 10? But you have to understand what is it about those 10 users that wants people to come back and play those 10, So you have to basically understand if the basic economics of your game actually works. If you can't fix that, otherwise you're just throwing marketing dollars down the drain. So that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, 100%, because at the end of the day, opt-outs are going to be inevitable. You will have a portion of users that will be opted out, and it's inevitable. The cost per acquisition of each new user is going to increase because of these limitations as well. So you really need to start working on your data, first-party data, as Abhi was mentioning, and working also on solutions that don't rely on third-party data. That's inevitable. I mean, since last year we were right. I hope now you guys are listening, because this is going to happen. Is a thing. It's not like, because I mean I represent a CMP, of course, but we are seeing this trend in the industry. This is very clear that it's going to this direction. Of course, opportunities, short-term opportunities are, in my case, from what we have seen now, we serve more than 300 customers in gaming. We cover 250 million daily active users across all our customers, for which we manage their consent. The short-term opportunity is simply implementing or activating or passing this consent signal, because as Božo was mentioning, we see immediately the impact on our customers. We did case studies also with AdInMo. We saw from 10% to 200% increase in ARPU by simply passing the TCF signal, depending on the size of the app. But then we saw also, recently I was in a meeting with a very large publisher. I cannot name the name because they didn't give me the authorization. They're very big. And they saw 400% in ROAS simply by passing the consent signal to Google with consent mode. 400%. They were like, what's going on? Basically, their marketing campaign, all the millions they were spending, it was not correctly attributed because they didn't implement consent mode. So even large publishers, they were blind for a while. So it's very important to capture the opportunity of fixing, the short-term problem, but then already start thinking about, okay, what is the issue here? The issue is that third-party data are going to be less reliable. I need to start building my data and make sure that also in terms of monetization, let's say initiatives, I need to start thinking about new things that rely more on my players' data rather than keep acquiring new players, because it's going to be more difficult for sure.
In fact, just to add to that, and I think back to the one person in the room who might have been a plant from up here that raised their hand, was excited about privacy. First-party data is this huge opportunity, right? So especially if you're a publisher, right? Everybody's complaining about their own CPMs going down, right? We know that, and that's partly because, what is it, on iOS, maybe you're getting 15 to 20% maybe of your players that are sending a device ID. Yeah. And so now, if you're starting to collect this data about your players and you can generate insights from that, you're taking control back, right? You can now say, these players are more valuable. You have some control, you have some value that you're creating, instead of relying on AppLovin or IronSource or whoever to figure out what the value is for you. And and I represent an ad network here, and you always know that your ad networks, they're not always on your side, right? So you are getting that control back. That is your value as a publisher. So that first-party data is why I think this is so exciting, or should be.
I think your point, Božo, to that, well, absolutely. If I have to put, as a game developer, you have a lot of things to worry about. Build the game. Make sure the first set of users, make sure the levels are right, make sure it doesn't crash, people don't download delete the app, and all these things going through. And then, while it makes sense, I think one of the challenges, of course, as a game publisher is which one do I prioritize? One is, and that is a challenge, which one you're seeing. So it's not very easy to actually monetize, to use that. I think it's that we've seen that with clean rooms. Clean rooms in the data world. Does anyone know what clean rooms do? Well, yes, no one really knows. So it's one of those where people say, use a clean room and we'll basically take all your consented data, make it easy for advertisers to target. But the problem is that with clean room solutions, what happens is that the publisher, in this case, has to do all the work. They were expecting a plug-and-play solution, but then all of a sudden, hold on, I have to do all the work. Why am I paying you for that? So, in a similar way, data solutions, I think one of the things that we can strive forward is going to be as a data platform is how do we make things easy for you to then activate whatever the use case is, be it for acquisition, referral, revenue, monetization, and UA. All these things can be actually improved and increased for, from a metrics point of view with first-party data. We've seen it. It's a question of If it's a 5-person team or if it's a 1,000-person team, of course, resources at hand are different. So that level of sophistication will be different internally. So how can we make it easy for you to get started? Did you all have any issues with, because you have about 300 customers globally. Do you see any trends in terms of the company sizes who are, on board to implement the CMP?
Yeah, for sure. We saw much more adoption and faster adoption from large publishers. That's for sure. The medium, small publishers and indie studios, they struggle more because of what you mentioned. And because of what I said at the beginning, this is no longer a legal challenge only, but a performance marketing challenge. And I saw firsthand, some of our customers appointing a poor guy from marketing. Now you're the responsible for the CMP, and if something breaks, it's your fault. Because no one, and he's like, oh my God, I don't know, what is this banner, like the regulations? It's very scary, to be honest, to be in that position. I saw some publishers now creating teams around privacy, so where there is product, marketing, user acquisition, monetization, the legal person, so it's 5-6 people. But of course, smaller ones cannot afford this type of investment. It's crazy, and it's also one person in a small developer cannot know everything about regulations, CMPs, how to implement consent mode, etc. So this is where we see the least adoption, but it's also understandable. So from a user-centric side, we are trying to make our solution more and more self-service, but at the same time, a recommendation for smaller ones is to find trusted partners or advisors that can guide you, on the correct setup of the campaigns, etc. Don't try to do everything in-house on your own, because, the landscape is becoming, for sure, more and more complex, and it's very hard to keep up with all these things if you just want to build a cool game, and launch it. It's no longer as before. Now there are many things to take care about, but I think, yeah, seek help from advisors if you're a smaller one, rather than trying to fix everything on your own. Of course, a CMP helps because we cover all regulations, so in few clicks, you can get compliant with all the regulations all over the world. But still, also there, at the beginning, you need some help. Yeah,
sorry, on that self-service thing is something I've thought about a lot. And sorry, Jacki, I don't know if we're going completely off
you
script
carry
here.
on, I'm fine. I'm really interested.
Our SDK has always been self-service, and I was always adamant about that. Anybody can just download it and integrate it. But there's some downsides to that. Anybody can download it and integrate it and not necessarily do as good a job as they could, right? They don't have the learnings that we had. And we've seen that with the work that we've done with Usercentrics. There was a case study that showed the uplift on CPM. I think it was about a 60% uplift on CPM, about a 350% uplift on ARPDAU. But that didn't happen in day one, right? There were some best practices that needed to happen for the developer, and they were a small developer, to understand how to make that user journey as best as possible. And I think that's the place we're at right now. It's not just kind of plug and play for any of this yet. I don't know, Abby, about your solution, how much best practices there is, but we've certainly found that there's still some learning that we need to share with the developers. It's not quite just integrate it and go for it.
Yeah, this thing in software is like, what's the best piece of software? What's the best code that you ever write? Well, there's no code, because that's where you have 0 fuck-ups. So in a similar way, what's the best integration docs? Well, where it's as small as possible. But in this case also, you lose that, if you're just onboarding new customers or new users, you lose that face-to-face connection. Okay, what are you actually facing issues? Like, where are you getting stuck? So that's where you can, you lose that connection. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
So, we've established it's hard. We've established there are best practices to be done.
We've complained long enough.
But how do you do it? How can we grab hold of that first-party data and really take ownership of this? And
I think it would start with having the right framework in place to get consented data, because that is going to be an issue going forwards. So that once you have a good baseline to start off, you can build as many blocks on top of that. That's like a building. If the foundation is weak, you will not be able to have the right data in place that will allow you to then optimize your marketing campaigns, your targeting capabilities, your gameplay performance, all of that. You will just not be able to build that, and you'll just be allocating a whole bunch of marketing dollars without really understanding what is it about my game that is actually, causing a leaky bucket. and you might end up going months trying to build this new character, this new feature, this new nice little mechanism, but not actually solving the root cause. And what, as with anything, what does data allow you to do? Well, it allows you to understand problems.
It's interesting that you touched upon that, because I was speaking with a few agencies helping, small developers and also in these studios, and some of them threw their game away because they thought it was a game problem. You say building new feature. They were trying, okay, maybe if I create this new feature, this new level, it will change things, but it was not that the problem. It was actually a marketing setup problem. I don't know, Božo, if you see the same working with your clients?
I mean, so for example, we see a similar case where developers implement ads in a way that's not, not the one that you would actually want to have. They're not following the best practices. They're doing, let's say, the common mistakes. And then when the performance is not there, or when retention is hurting, where purchases are hurting, the conclusion is, oh, ads don't work. And it's kind of like, you have this cause and you have the effect, but you're not really connecting them, and you're coming up with a wrong conclusion, where the conclusion might be, okay, maybe my implementation is not right, maybe I need to hire somebody to help me with this, or I need to do an A/B test or try to figure this out before I move on to the next project. So I think that's the same thing with the privacy and just like the entire flow about the first party.
Absolutely, data. And if you think, I'm still an engineer, so I know my inherent first instinct is to build new shit. That's inherent new stuff. If this feature doesn't work, let's build one more feature. If not this, let's build another feature. But then, if I don't have the right data, and we've had this internally at NumberEight many a time, and I'm sure most companies, you get in this habit of building new stuff, but not actually stopping. Let's not build. Let's figure out why something is not working. Because if you don't actually stop and learn, you're going to make the same mistake over and over again. Doesn't matter what new feature you build, and that's a reality.
Well, when people do have the CMP implemented, are they using them actively enough? Are they pushing the consent string proactively enough, do you think?
Well, in the EU, yeah, and I think it's worth. There is a bit of confusion, honestly, even within our team. This is complicated things, but it is worth kind of noting that when we talk about consented audiences, and a player that says, yes, I give you consent to track me, and I'm passing my device ID, that's gold, right? That's your golden ticket. That's the one that you really want. But even if they say no, but there is the TCF string associated with that to say that we have a supply chain tracking to say we actually know this player did give some sort of consent or not, versus it was just who knows if they did or did not. That player still has value as well, because we see even in the EU there are some games that are still not even passing a TCF string, and the value between a consented player with yes, consented and yes with the TCF, consented no but still with TCF, versus nothing, each of those have a different value. And back to, if we're passing a TCF string for a player that still said no, we can still do contextual targeting with them, and that's really interesting too. And that's the other thing that we forget about.
And there are solutions coming out for to how you deal with your opt-outs as well. But I'd like to get, you've got to get your first-party data.
You do have to get,
right?
And on the part of what you mentioned about, in all stages of the gameplay, you have an option to actually leverage it. And for example, because we work in gaming, we work in podcasting, we work in streaming, similar problems come up as well. For example, in streaming, they want to convert free to paid users. Same thing. In a gameplay environment, you want to make sure players, if they want to, if you want to push IAP offers, that they're actually going to pay. And they want to, cough up cash. And then how do you understand when is the right moment to actually push the right offer? The same thing that we have, when you have mail-in, tickets in your post box, am I going to buy that ticket immediately? No, I'm going to go through it. So how do you understand the right moment that's going to have the highest conversion? Well, you can use first-party data for that. And the same thing, how do you make sure all the push notifications that you send to re-engage or replay the game that you got stuck on level 45, how do you make sure that that push notification has the right messaging and is sent in the right moment so you can actually open that?
Yeah. So we're sort of coming into the last 5 minutes of our panel. These things always race far quicker than I like them to. As we sort of move towards getting you guys to ask us some questions, my final question to you is, what do you see the greatest opportunity in being an early adopter, let's say, like really getting to grip with your first-party data, really understanding, how to leverage consent? Go.
As a consent, so first of all, before thinking about opportunities, if you haven't implemented what I mentioned before, so TCF and consent mode, please do, because maybe your tools are not working properly. So capture the short-term opportunity. Then, if you have the resources to start looking into, new monetization opportunities, try new tools. I think I saw, like, the last 2 days, I saw many tools already mentioning, ID-less, working with ID-less solution. I think it's time to, to give them a chance and to work with those, because in the future they will be more and more prominent, and I think it's a good time to start experimenting. 2025 represents now the shift towards privacy first, and I would recommend, to start looking seriously into these new alternatives.
Any more?
I'd say, in terms of if you have any questions with regards to how to actually leverage first-party data, because one is you have to make sure you have the platform in place to actually be able to capture that. If you have any questions from a gameplay point of view, will they get our details or something after?
Well, this is the interesting thing. All of the reason this is such a great panel is that all of these individual companies all actually work together to provide a total solution to help developers and publishers get ahead of this.
Yeah, I think with Kristan, with Abhi and Božo, we've been talking about privacy since 4 years, and then
just
like one day this will come, and then it's now the future is now.
If you have any questions on that, but that's, and even if it's just to have a chat in terms of how do I leverage, I'm having an issue with marketing dollars being wasted, or I'm having an issue where players get stuck on a specific level, and I'm sending 5,000 push notifications, players aren't coming back. These are actual problems. Because all of these things, if you have questions around those, just feel free to have a chat. Because first-party data, if you're able to capture it, it will help you identify what are the leaky buckets. Definitely.
And then you said, Jacki, I think the words you used were how to get ahead of it, right?
Yeah.
And so even if I haven't convinced anybody about how fun and exciting this privacy-first world is, then at least the kind of getting ahead of the curve, right? And remember back to, again, when ATT came, when Apple put in the LAT stuff, right? Apple screwed that whole thing up, and it was very poorly communicated to developers, right? And we were all running around at the last minute. And then what was it, a year or so ago, Google did the same thing, and we're all waiting, and like a month later, you better do this, right? So at the very least, if you're not convinced about the excitement, this is coming elsewhere, right? The EU was just the first starting point of this. It's going to be happening in the US. It's going to be happening in Latin America. So, at least rather than having that last minute scramble, start doing the work of integrating a good CMP, getting your data strategies in place, so that you're not doing that mad rush to just protect your revenue when the next change comes down the pipeline. And that's the only thing we do know is that it's going to keep changing.
It's happening in India, Japan, South Korea, China, so also Asia. So.
Yeah, and Abhi, you were just in CES, and you were getting questions saying, hey, great, you're dealing with Europeans.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because, like in the States, for example, when they look at, you're based out of London, well, it's not really EU anymore, but still, you get the point, is, if you're working in Europe, we're fine to work with you in the US. Because they're always looking up to Europe for privacy regulations. So if you have US-based, if you have European customers, you're an immediate green flag to work in the US. It's just because, their DPOs will be like, you work in France? Oh, that's like the strictest place you can think of. So you must be okay.
Yeah.
So we definitely saw that over and over again.
Yeah.
And especially with DPOs who are like, who are used to, where do you store your data? How is it tracked? How many IDs do you have? All of a sudden you say, we don't have any IDs. And it's like, that just makes my job a lot easier.
So, have we got any questions for this brilliant panel? Do you want to grab them afterwards? Any at all? Well, then I think we're wrapped, unless you want to say any more. No, that's it. All right, we're done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.